Hello and welcome to this short video on carrot stretches. My name is Dr. Gillian Tabor. I'm a chartered physiotherapist and I specialise in the treatment and the rehabilitation of horses. You may know me, you may be a client of mine, so this may be something I've sent you so that you can work with these exercises on your own horses, or you may have found this on another platform. If you're not my client and I haven't prescribed these specifically for your horse, then they are only for general information and you are advised to seek advice of a relevant practitioner. But if you are my client and I have suggested that you should do these exercises with your horses, and if you are interested in carrot stretches and not my client, then hopefully this will give you lots of information. So I said carrot stretches, but they are more correctly termed dynamic mobilisation exercises because they are not stretches in our traditional sense. We're not taking a single joint to an end of range, and we're also not doing the exercises passively. They are very active in the horse. So the horse is using their own musculature to reach a desired end position, which may or may not be their end of available range of motion. But it's very, it's dynamic because it's movement. We're having lots of effect throughout the whole body, not just through the neck, and they can actually be really useful. And they're a set of exercises that have been thoroughly researched in the equine literature. We know that they have two major effects. The first is you take the body through a range of motion. So as the horse follows the bait, so in this case food or the carrot, they are actually taking the joints through certain planes of motion, so flexion and extension, through lateral flexion, so that's bend to the side, and also through rotation. And it's a combination of all of these movements that achieve their ability to reach the food that you're offering them. We also are looking at the whole body when we do these. So we're not just thinking that they move the head and neck. Now, there are ways of biasing exercises to one area of the spine more than the other, but in general, and I'm going to talk you through these in more detail, I choose a couple of positions that seem to have the most beneficial effect. Because in reality, it's not often that we only want to move the neck, we actually want to move the whole back region, so underneath where we sit and as far back as we possibly can do. Usually we're looking to lift up the back and lengthen the top line. And yes, we can do that with the place that we aim the nose to. The other effect that these exercises do have, if they are done regularly enough, is they actually have an ability to develop the size of the deep spinal stabilizer muscle, multifidus. And this has been shown in a number of studies. So in horses that are on box rest, we can see that the size of the multifidus muscle that lies along the spinal vertebrae increased. And also in addition to standard exercise, if we do these carrot stretches regularly, we also saw an increase in the muscle size. And there is a relationship between muscle size and strength. And if we take our knowledge from human literature, we will know that actually that's a good thing, because in in people that have been shown to have back pain, these muscles are smaller. We've now just seen in some research that these muscles are smaller in horses that have a long-term forelimb lameness. And we also know, if we have got evidence of problems in the spine, spinal pathology, bony, osseous changes, then we see that these multifidus muscles are actually asymmetric. So what we're looking to do with the exercise is take the spine through a range of motion and also strengthen those deep spinal stabilizer muscles. So in the research, there were a number of positions that these exercises used, so actually 10 in total. And if you're carrying out a research study, then all those positions are very useful to use. But in practice, I recommend 2 positions. The first one, if we are targeting the neck and the back region, so between the withers and the hindquarters, I like to take the horse low and wide to the side. So here you'll see my young horse at the time, this is Leader, and I am sort of roughly aiming his nose to the level of his hock. So what I want him to do is I want him to reach around. So if you hold whatever food that you've got for them very carefully, obviously ensuring that your fingers aren't get eaten, get their interest in it and then get them to follow the food. So you're luring them round to this position. This position is slightly different to the ones where you have the nose higher up, and I don't want the nose really that close to the body. So it's at least 1/2 meter away, and some people do this exercise where they're stood with their back to the girth region and they have the horse wrapping around in front of them to reach down towards roughly their knee, on the leg that is closest towards the tail. So that's another good way of doing that exercise. But you want it low and wide to the side. The lower that you get it, you actually then get the back to lift up. And also the width away from the body helps to avoid the risk of compressing the base of the neck in towards the front of the shoulder blade, which in fully flexible horses, that's not a problem. But if you have any limitation in the mobility, or perhaps you have a horse that has neck problems, then you don't really want to hold them in that position for a long time. Now, I've said hold. In the research, the aim was with repetitions of the exercises to have them to stay in that position for 5 to 10 seconds. And yes, it is really good if you can do that, because it's like doing a squat and then having that little pulse at the end, and that's the one that gets the muscles really firing. So if you can avoid the horse swinging around, snatching the food and then straightening up again, then that's going to be of benefit to you. And what you can do is you can use a food reward such as a lick, to have them to stay in that position for a while. But just be aware that sometimes these licks have high sugar content. So if that's something you're trying to avoid with your horse, then please think about the food substance that you are giving them. But if you have them moving really nicely low and wide round to the side and you look up at the back, you'll see that it's lifted. If you get the opportunity to watch somebody else do it with your horse, or perhaps somebody takes a picture for you whilst you're doing it, you should see that their entire rib cage swings to the other side. And that's really good because they're shortening on the inside and then lengthening all the way through the outside. So what I would do is I would repeat that to each side 3 to 5 times, aiming for our 5 to 10 second hold. Then the other exercise that I'd like people to do is very simply just reach down for a carrot between their front fetlocks. Now, the way to do this is to have a little bit of food in each hand. So the hand that is in front of the legs gets their attention and they follow the food down, and then you sort of pass them over to the hand that then is behind the legs so that then they can take the reward there. Now, even in this picture, it is a little bit high, his nose is, so you are going to have to bend down to get that nose level with the fetlocks. Quite commonly, the horse will walk backwards. So if that's the case, and also with the ones where you go around to the side, they might swing their bottom. It's not a problem. You just let them move backwards, and eventually if you're in somewhere like a stable, you'll get to a corner and they will then stop and stand still, and you can repeat the exercise. The other thing that happens is that the horse might flex the knee on the side that is closest to you. And if that's the case, then what I would do is I'd definitely stop at that point, because that's showing that they've sort of got to the end of their flexibility. And so they are using some strategies to help them get a little bit further. But don't worry about it, just swap to the other side and you'll find that they may flex the knee on the other side when you're stood on the other side. So long as you repeat the stretches between the fetlocks from both sides, then that'll even it up. What I always get concerned about, though, is if the horse flexes both knees, because that puts a bit of an unusual strain down through the joints of the lower legs. So don't ask them to go that far if that is the case. So in both these pictures, I'm coming to the side and coming down forwards, you can see that my horse is not stood square. And this is a point that I'd like to make, that actually this doesn't concern me. You could spend hours and hours and hours trying to get your horse to stand square, and then you don't actually get the chance to practice the exercises. But in all honesty, we want our horse to explore ranges of motion, move through their back, move through their head and neck with their legs in different positions, because this is actually going to make them more robust. They're going to then have the capacity to move their spine, switch on the muscles of the abdomen, the core, through the head and neck, when they are in these different positions. That's then going to replicate more of real life when you are out and about training. If we go back to this one round to the side, what I quite like to ensure, though, is that the ears are at the highest point. Sometimes when the horse reaches round to the side, you find that they bend, and then all of a sudden their front of their face goes horizontal and they end up sort of looking up at you and up at the food. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, actually, what I'm getting there is a little bit too much rotation at the upper spine. I don't think it's dangerous for the horse, but I think it's actually showing me that their range of motion has got to the end. And when we think about riding our horses, we really like to have their head and neck fairly vertical, and then they just flex to the side rather than tilt and rotate. So it's up to you really to observe how far your horse can go, at what point they get to. So my picture here, my young horse is quite flexible and he can get a long way around. But if you've got an older horse, or you've got a horse that's got stiffness or pain or problems, then you might not be able to go as far as that. So I really urge you to observe how your horse is moving and then modify the exercises, perhaps taking the distance that you're asking them to stretch back a little bit each time. So I hope those answer some questions about how to do your carrot stretches and how to get the best out of them. If you want to get in touch with me, if you've got any more questions, then there's some few links here. On my website, I've got links to some courses where I go through these in more details. You can send me an email, physio@gilliantabor.co.uk, and I'm on Instagram as Dr. Gillian Tabor Physio, and I'm also on Facebook at Gillian Tabor Equine Physio and Rehab. So thank you very much for listening, and yes, have fun with your dynamic mobilisation exercises.